Welcome to day 8. Today we're going to talk about how happiness happens. So words, as I mentioned before, are a really interesting human construct. We sometimes take lots of different disparate things and lump them into one word. For example, in the English language, there's one word for blue. In the Russian language, there are two words for blue. Russian speakers, therefore, are better at perceiving shades of blue than English speakers. Again, in the Himba language, there are 19 words for green and no word for blue. The Himba people cannot perceive the color blue, but they can perceive differences in shades of green that would be impossible for an English speaker to perceive. Now, happiness is one of those words we often perceive wrongly. We think happiness is one thing. It's not. It turns out just like a Russian speaker has two words for blue and thus has greater perception for the color blue, when we take happiness as a word and break it apart, we can understand and get to happiness faster. So what I want to suggest is that we take the word happiness and we break it into 3 different types of happiness. The first type of happiness is happiness from special, unique experiences. Let's say going on a Ferris wheel, making out with someone you absolutely love, watching a movie that totally thrills you, driving that new car, being appreciated at work. All of these give us a boost in happiness. But here's the interesting thing. All of these boosts of happiness have to do with the chemicals going through our body. The chemicals like dopamine and serotonin that actually induce different levels of happiness. And you can fake it. You can give someone a pill and induce happiness. So is that happiness really real? What if we were able to invent a machine that would nonstop pump our bodies with happiness chemicals? We'd be too blissed out to care about the world. Would we truly be fulfilling our soul's potential? So if we define happiness, as most people do, as simply the elevated emotion of bliss, then we could create a future in the human race where we take you, we plug you into a machine, we fill you with nonstop blissful chemicals, and your life is complete. That isn't really happiness. You see, there's a second type of happiness that I believe is even more important. Now, to understand the second type of happiness, we must understand the nature of human beings. Do we believe that human beings are purely flesh and blood creatures, or do we believe that human beings have a soul? And if so, why is the soul really here? Now, I believe that no matter what definition of human being you use, you'll agree on the second definition of happiness. Happiness from growth. Happiness from growth means we create a sense of happiness or fulfillment or whatever you want to call it. Let's not get hung up on the word. As we're growing, when we walk out of a gym because we just gave our best at a workout, when we finish a book, when we come out of a seminar, when we do the reverse gap exercise and think about how much we've grown, this creates a boost in happiness. This is a far healthier type of happiness. You're not chasing an experience. You're measuring yourself today against what you were a few hours ago before you walked into that gym, or months or years ago before you gained the insights, the knowledge, the ideas, the practices that you have today. Happiness from growth is one of the most powerful forms of happiness you can get. And no matter what your definition of human being is, happiness from growth makes sense. If we are nothing more than a biological creature, the subject of millions of years of evolution, then happiness from growth means we're becoming more sophisticated and more advanced as a biological creature. Or if you believe we are souls having a human experience, then happiness from growth means that our soul is evolving through wisdom, through new ideas, through new ways of perceiving the world. The problem is our broken education system trains us the wrong way. It makes school be about grades, about passing exams, about standardized tests. And so many of us grow up thinking that learning and happiness are two different things. But if you actually look at the research, learning and happiness are one. And it applies all the way from the time we are children. As a child, children experience some of their most joyful states when they are learning. Have you ever watched a baby explore the world? That baby is a learning machine. But all of a sudden, when they become 5 or 6, depending on what country you're in, they are put into a school, and now there's that separation. There's learning, which is something you have to do to survive in the world, to get a good job and be a good kid. And then there is happiness, which is something you do when you're hooked up to your iPad or Netflix. That is where our schooling system creates this gap that messes us up. But when you embrace the idea of rate of self-evolution, which I introduced earlier, and when you understand that the soul is here to grow, you start to see that happiness from growth is one of the best forms of happiness. Now that is the second type of happiness. Let's go on to the third type. The third type of happiness is happiness from meaning. This is the happiness that actually comes to us when we are living a life that has meaning. Now, what does meaning mean? Well, to most people, it comes from serving others. Again, let's look at this from a soul and a biological perspective. Human beings are colony species. We're more like ants than solo animals. When an ant is in a colony, they cooperate with each other. The ants need other ants to survive. Human beings are like that. We need other people to survive. So perhaps the fact that we become happy when we are helping other people, or we have meaning in our life, or we are raising our children, is this biological directive for us to cooperate. Now, if you think of us as souls having a human experience, the same idea comes into play. The idea of us as a soul means that all of us have a soul, and all of these souls are part of a greater unity or God. Why, then, would we not be happier from helping other souls flourish? So again, no matter what your worldview, the idea of meaning as a part to happiness makes sense. The best way to observe this and understand this is what social psychologist Roy Baumeister calls the parenthood paradox. See, what Baumeister says is that parenthood is such a complex, messy, often disgusting task. You have sleepless nights. I've had my son pee on my face as I'm changing his diaper. That is not traditionally something that would make a man happy. I've had to clean poop from walls as a parent. And if you're a parent, you know what I'm talking about. Yet I wouldn't trade the experience of being a parent with anything else. It is the most fulfilling, incredible experience. It made me happy, even though I had those sleepless nights, even though I've had to wake up at 3 a.m. and then 4 and then 5 to burp a baby who just can't seem to get rid of his gas. This parenthood paradox shows us that there's a certain sense of happiness that comes to us when we are serving our species. This third type of happiness comes from meaning. When you put all of these together, you start to see that happiness as a word makes little sense, and it shouldn't. We need to look at happiness from these three pillars. First, the experiences you're having in life. Are you living life in awe, in states of wonder? Are you having beautiful moments day to day that give you elevated sparks of joy? Number two, are you growing on a daily basis? Are you paying attention to your rate of self-evolution? Do you have Mind Valley time in the morning, 20 minutes to listen to this quest? Have you set up your morning so that you have time to invest in personal growth? Third, meaning. Are you living a life? Are you in a job where you're serving others? When you stack this together, something remarkable happens. Not only do you live your life in greater levels of happiness, but your health actually improves. There was an interesting study of nuns, and what the study showed was incredible. Basically, a group of scientists went to a nunnery, and they looked at these nuns who were like in their 80s and 90s. And what happened in this nunnery is that the nuns had to keep a daily diary. So this scientist examined the diaries of these nuns, and they rated every diary based on the percentage of positive entries. Now, they took the diaries and the nuns and put them in two groups. One group was the most positive diaries, the top 50%, and the other group was the bottom 50%. Now, what the study found was fascinating. They found that by the age of 85, the nuns in the top segment, the top 50%, 90% of them were still alive. But in the bottom half, only 34% of them were still alive. Pay attention to that. Your positive states actually influence your lifespan to a remarkable degree, 34% versus 90%. So let's come back to the three types of happiness. Now, this is what you need to know. there's a concept called hedonic adaptation. And what it means is that happiness pretty much plateaus at a certain level. One study showed that in the United States, once you hit a certain income bracket, your happiness plateaus. Money beyond that might be great, but it does little to increase your happiness. Check out this graph. The lesson here, don't think money is the answer. Yes, you need to get to a certain level where you can be comfortable and you can have your basic needs met, but beyond that, money has little contribution to your level of happiness. Hedonic adaptation also suggests that if you go through a tragedy, after around 1 year, you tend to bounce back. In other words, you can be in a really miserable situation, but it is your choice whether you choose to perceive it as miserable or as happiness. My friend Sean Stevenson shows this quality. Sean was born with brittle bone disease. This means that his bones broke so easily that just him coming out of the womb caused hundreds of breaks. As a result, Sean was 3 feet tall, confined to a wheelchair. His legs didn't work, and his arms barely worked. But Sean was one of the happiest people I knew. Doctors gave him just a few weeks to live. Sean jokes about it this way.
When I was born, the doctors told my parents that I would be dead within the first 24 hours of my life. 35 years later, all those doctors are dead.
And Sean had a remarkable ability to be truly happy and spark joy in others no matter what. He passed away at the age of 40 in 2019. It was a big loss to the world. But I share Sean's story here because Sean shows us that hedonic adaptation is real. And no matter how shitty life can get, it is your choice to be happy. So right now, let's open up your journals again. And this time, what you're going to do is do a different style of the reverse gap exercise. Once again, you're going to pick a moment in the past as a reference point, and you're going to think about how far you've grown. You can repeat things you wrote down yesterday, the first time you did the reverse gap exercise. But this time, you're going to break down how you've transformed into these 3 different types of happiness. First, you're going to list new experiences you've had in the past years that have contributed to your happiness. Maybe it was a trip. Maybe it was a particular person you fell in love with. Maybe it was the birth of a baby. Maybe it was a new puppy. Maybe it was moving into a new home or making a trip to Disneyland. What were those experiences in the reverse gap that gave you a boost in happiness? Then you're going to list growth. How have you grown? What books have you read? How has your body changed? What new practices have you taken on? What types of new wisdom have come into your life? And then you're going to list happiness from meaning. Think about your family, your children. Think about your contribution to the world. Think about the work you do and how it's impacted other people's lives. I'm going to bring you back to these 3 ideas later this week. And I'm going to teach you a powerful method called the 3 most important questions to actually create a vision for your future that is aligned with elevating these 3 types of happiness and not with the rules of the culturescape. Go ahead and do this exercise. And once again, if you so feel compelled, share your journal entry, take a picture of it, and upload it into the community so you can inspire others.